Hi, everyone. So this is your mini lecture on relativism. So relativism, I think, is probably one of the most popular theories among people if you ask them what they think about what makes things right or wrong. A lot of people would say that, well, what's right or wrong is just really a matter of opinion, right? They might say that, well, what I think is right or wrong is right or wrong for me. Whatever you think is right or wrong for you, and that's just sort of the end of it. Okay, so if you're the kind of person who thinks that it is morally wrong to eat meat, it's wrong for you to eat meat according to relativistic theories. If I don't think it's wrong to eat meat, then it's not wrong for me to eat meat according to relativistic theories. It's just a matter of our opinions and beliefs, okay, which dictate what's right or wrong for us. So I think a lot of people really like those kinds of theories. There's also some motivations for adopting relativistic theories. One motivation for adopting relativistic theory might be that you might think, well, who's to say what's right or wrong? And really, if there was some one person to say who's right or wrong, it's probably God. If it's not God, then it sure as hell isn't any human. Okay, right? Doesn't seem right to say that maybe I in particular are the one who says what's right or wrong. That'd be kind of strange. All right. So that's one motivation for adopting relativistic theories. Another theory is that there's all sorts of moral disagreement around the world, and lots of cultures and people just disagree on moral matters, right? So last I checked, at least, if you look at the public opinion on abortion in Spain, abortion is very widely viewed as immoral. Last I checked. Okay, this might be a little outdated now, but last I checked, many people in Spain thought it was immoral for people to have abortions. Look in Japan, most people tend to think it's totally fine, or at least it's morally permissible. It's okay to have an abortion. All right. So there's lots of obvious disagreement on all sorts of moral issues. Abortion's one of them. There's all sorts of other moral issues we can talk about, but that's just one example. Okay. So the fact that there's lots of disagreement about moral matters might just suggest then you would think that, well, whatever's right or wrong is just really a matter of what people think. Okay. So I've been talking about relativistic theories in general, but there's two kinds of relativistic theories we'll look at. One is called subjective, or it's something called individual relativism. I'm going to call it individual relativism. That's my preferred way of talking about it. Your book calls it subjective. It's fine however you talk about it. I'll know what you're talking about if you write in a paper, your discussion board, or you're talking about it or whatever. So individual relativism thinks that actions are right or wrong because they're endorsed by the individual. So that's just a little bit more of a formal way of saying that things are right or wrong because a person thinks that they're right or wrong. Okay, so again, if I think that's morally permissible for me to eat meat, then it's morally permissible for me to eat meat. Whether it's for you is going to depend upon what you think. Okay, that's on an individual level. You can go now to a cultural level and say that actions are right or wrong because they're endorsed by the culture an individual is a part of. Okay, this is a little bit different, right? So now instead of it being on the individual level, namely that whatever I think is right or wrong for me, now this is saying, okay, we're going to step up, and what's right or wrong for me is really a function of what my culture thinks. Okay. So, for example, let's just stick with the meat eating example because it's a moral question whether or not it's morally permissible to eat meat, whether it's morally permissible to use animals for, whether or not it's morally permissible to kill animals for their products, whether it's food or fur or whatever, okay? So American culture predominantly thinks that it's okay to do so. All right, so because my culture thinks that, and I'm part of the American culture, then it's okay for me to eat meat because that's what my culture thinks, okay? Whereas if I was maybe part of a vegetarian culture, for instance, right? So if I grew up in a certain part of India where predominantly the population was vegetarian, then it might be morally wrong for me to eat meat because my culture would say that's morally wrong for me to eat meat, okay? So that's the two kinds of relativism, all right? And people typically, I think, maybe flip-flop between these a lot, okay? Some people might say that, you might ask them about whether or not, for instance, it's morally wrong to, let's stick with the abortion example here, right? So you might think, if you're in Japan, you might think, well, it's okay because our culture endorses it, all right? But then maybe some things at a more individual level, people tend to be more attracted to. So I think especially matters of, I think meetings may be a good example. A lot of people tend to think that maybe meat eating is the kind of thing that's right or wrong just because it's just on a personal level. You might think it's like a personal choice. Sometimes you hear that thrown around a lot. Moral matters are like a personal choice, you might think. That's the kind of time when people are really attracted to this, but sometimes other times they're attracted to this, okay? Now, what's really interesting about that and what's worth noting is that these two theories are not necessarily compatible. In fact, they actually conflict quite a bit, right? So if I have an individual belief that contradicts my culture's beliefs on things, then we're going to get conflicting results here, right? So suppose I am a vegetarian, I think it's morally impermissible to eat meat, okay? Even though I'm part of a culture that says it's okay to eat meat, if individual relativism is right, then for me, it's wrong to eat meat, okay, even though my culture would say it's okay. So there's obvious conflicts once an individual's views conflict with what the culture thinks, all right? But nonetheless, people really tend to like these views, all right? Now, before I go into the objection to these views, because I think I hopefully got the motivations pretty clear at the beginning, and I think because I'm guessing a lot of you think one of these two theories is right, you probably are in the ballpark of the motivations I talked about when it comes to why does you accept these theories, okay? Now, I want to make a distinction between something really quickly here, because this has become really important when we look at the objections to these theories. So, there's a distinction between, I'm only going to talk about this thing once. I'm about to write down on the board. We're talking about it once and we're going to sort of drop it, okay? The reason why I draw this is I don't want to confuse you all. So there's something called descriptive cultural relativism. Okay? And then there's cultural relativism, which is the one I just talked about, that says that actions are right or wrong just because it's endorsed by my culture. Okay. Why is descriptive culturalism different from cultural relativism? Okay. There's a really fine distinction here that I want to make super clear. Okay. This also applies at an individual level, but typically the confusion comes on a cultural level when we talk about societies. Okay. Descriptive cultural relativism is a claim about what cultures think about what's right or wrong. Descriptive cultural relativism is just going to say that different cultures have different moral beliefs, okay? That's all this is saying, all right? Your book doesn't talk about this very much, but the idea is just that it's just a factual description that says if you look at different cultures, there's varying moral beliefs. That's all it's saying, okay? Now, why is that important? The reason why that's important is because some people make the jump from saying different cultures have different moral beliefs to the claim that certain things are right or wrong just because it's endorsed by my culture. The reason why those things are different is because what this is talking about what makes things right or wrong. This isn't just saying different cultures have different moral beliefs. This is making a further step. It's not only saying that, well, maybe it's saying that, maybe it's not. But it's probably just people who probably endorse that are going to say that. Okay, but they don't need to. But in any event, that's a side note. In any event, this is saying things become right or wrong when they're endorsed by a culture that I'm a part of, or you're a part of, or whatever. Okay. So it's making a claim about what makes things right or wrong. This is not making a claim about what's right or wrong at all. This is just saying that if you ask people, if you run a survey, it's making more like a psychological claim. It's just saying, oh yeah, different culture, different moral beliefs. It's not saying that as a matter of fact, things are right or wrong based upon culture. That is not what this is saying. What this is just saying is that different culture, different moral beliefs. And the reason why I'm really hammering this home is because these get confused a lot, okay, all the time. All right, I see it way too much. And it's really easy to get confused, to be fair. It's really easy to get confused. But they're two different claims. One's the claim about what cultures think, and just merely what they think. That's what this is saying. The other one is just saying that as a matter of whether things are right or wrong, those things become right or wrong when a culture endorses or forbids them, okay? So, two totally different claims, all right? Now, and this also applies to individual level too. So you can say, as a matter of fact, individuals have different moral beliefs, but it's a separate claim to say that what's right or wrong is based upon what an individual thinks. Because, just like with the cultural stuff, so suppose I'm not a relativist, okay? Suppose I'm a divine command theorist, okay? Let's just stick with that because that's what we've talked about so far. Divine command theorists are not gonna say what's right or wrong is dependent upon an individual. It's gonna say what's right or wrong is dependent upon what God commands, all right? So suppose I'm a divine command theorist, okay? So I'm gonna say what's right or wrong is dependent upon God, all right? And what he commands. Okay, I can still buy into descriptive cultural relativism though, right? I can say, look, I'm a divine command theorist. I think what's right or wrong is based upon what God commands. But I also think that just as like a matter of fact, cultures disagree on things, right? But I can't say I'm a divine command theorist, but at the same time, I think what's right or wrong is dependent upon what a culture thinks, right? Because what cultures think and what God thinks can conflict. They're not the same, right? God's commanding and a culture's endorsement are not the same thing, okay? They can have all sorts of conflicts, all right? And even if they were the same thing, it's not the same source, okay? It's not the same thing that makes the actions right or wrong, okay? So, these are two totally different claims. And as we'll see in the objections to relativism video, this distinction becomes really, really important.